All right, everybody. Well, even though we had a slightly earlier start with some purchased fruit, today marks the start of Troon's harvest for 2025. So, now is when like all of the hard work that you guys have been putting in all year, farm team has been putting in all year. I feel like one of those game shows, right, where the power now shifts to the jury or something, where all of their work becomes all of our works. But it's I think the vineyard looks great this year. It's really starting to come into its own. We're starting to get a lot more growth on our newer vines, and just really looking forward to what this harvest will bring. We've got great weather for the next, looks like 10-day forecast at least. So we're going to have some perfect ripening weather, and looking forward to a great 2025. So cheers, everybody, to a good 2025.
Cheers. But I think we're at the point now where we can think about looking back at harvest and try to digest all that happened to us. We're here today with Nate Wall, our winemaker.
Hi, Nate.
And Micah Wagner, our assistant winemaker.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that I would like to find out who made this quote, but it's a winemaker I read once said that you only make a wine once in your life, which I think is really true, especially in our situation where you're a biodynamic winemaker where your whole goal is to express that year. So, and on top of that, we've replanted everything, and Nate, we've given you a whole new batch of wines to look at every year. So, just kind of looking back and maybe, how did the 2025 feel to you?
Yeah, I like that quote. It's kind of a similar concept of you can't step into the same river twice kind of thing, right? Because it's always everything's movement and change, and that's definitely at a place like Troon where we very much embrace vintage variation. Like, wine is an agricultural product; it should be subject to vintage variation. Like, you shouldn't ever make the same wine twice, right? Like, it's only in like these highly commercial, highly manipulated situations where they try to obliterate like any change that you ever see that. So it's all the additives, all the things, like that's when they try to remove that. Like, when you're trying to make like real and honest wines, you need to embrace those differences. So I love that quote about never making the same wine twice, because I definitely feel like I have never made the same wine twice at Troon, and sometimes that's often literally the case too, because we keep getting all these fun new varieties to play with each year, as you alluded to, as more of our kind of exciting varieties that we have replanted here come online. So it's always something new here.
Right. I mean, you went from Willamette Valley to here, both areas with a lot of vintage variation.
Yeah.
But a totally different type of vintage variation. How has that experience been different for you from Willamette to here?
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of, I guess, since we're talking about vintage variation, there's kind of two aspects of it, and one is kind of climatic and one is cultural, I would say, because obviously the climate here in the Applegate, I think we have a really unique climate, and a lot of the varieties we've purposely planted are kind of near the edges of some of the ripening, regions of a lot of the Rhone grapes we've planted. They're historically from some warmer areas in the Applegate Valley, and that is where you get the more exciting wines. Like, wines are most fascinating when grown at the edges of their kind of climatic range. So that does involve then more variation, because like smaller changes in climate year to year will have larger changes on the wine. So that's exciting. But then I think from a cultural perspective, it's kind of Troon's minimal intervention approach, which really highlights vintage variation, because since we aren't changing our wine chemistry after we pick, that really just by default highlights the vintage, because when you're not changing what nature gives you, you're very clearly expressing the nature of that year. So I think just trying to double down on that is that there's like both the climatic aspect, but then at Troon, since we choose not to kind of even that out, like we don't use additives to try to alter and what that kind of natural signature is from the climate of that year, it really allows us to express how different wines can be from vintage year.
So Micah, both you and I had experience in California, which is a more consistent, shall we say, climate. What have your biggest challenges have been as you came to Oregon?
Yeah, transitioning into a very different wine style from my previous winery, which I'm a huge fan of. I think learning a property like this is a big step. So this was my second harvest here, and that in itself, I actually had the blocks down this year because I've had more than 3 months to know where things are. And we had gone over, everything the year before, and tasted through things for our blending sessions the summer previous. So I kind of had an idea in my mind of what things tasted like block to block. But obviously we got a lot more fruit than 2024. And I love the way we make wine, though, just because I know both of us have been asked recently. It's how do we describe to people vintage variation? If they're looking for a certain thing, they remember a certain wine or a certain label a certain way, and then it turns out differently the next time. How do we describe that? And it's always really sad to me when people don't embrace and enjoy wines like that, because, kind of going off what Nate was saying, I think that from our perspective, when people talk about a wine telling a story, it's I know what happened that year, that harvest. So to me, I'm tasting things and I understand what happened in the vineyard and the winery that year, and what choices we altered, different barrels or vessels that we used. To me, it's a really exciting thing when you see those differences, even if you didn't plan for something to happen or taste the way it did. But obviously with so many projects here and a lot smaller lots, I think that, even though I had gone through a full year and understood to a degree what fruit we would be getting in and kind of what we were doing with it, just adding more grapes obviously has its learning experiences that come with that. So I am all for vintage variation, but we definitely had to make a lot of decisions kind of fast this year with how everything came in and how much came in.
How did you like being able to, of course you liked it, but you were able to be here for that full season this time and, start with the grapes dormant in the vineyard, right? And go through that whole process.
Yeah.
What was that for you? Especially at a property like this with so many.
That's exactly why I'm here, right? So it was really cool experiencing the full year because, again, I think May was when I started the year before. So, that is really when you start doing more in the vineyard. But yeah, it was nice experiencing on this property everything happening truly from dormant season through harvest. And again, just understanding more. It's you can try to memorize different blocks and all the information, but it feels like you can actually be part of the decision-making process a little bit more when you've already experienced one harvest. But previously, there were 9 acres of fruit at Rossi, but a lot of the fruit I was getting in, I visited sites, but it wasn't like this where we're actually pressure bombing and walking the vineyard if we want every day, right? It's we're visiting different parts of blocks all the time and going out to see the animals, working on the farm. So that's been a very different experience that I think for us in our winemaking style, it really benefits us too, to be right here and understand all the way through vine to wine.
I often see Applegate Valley as being kind of a transitional zone, between Northern California weather and Willamette Valley weather. You guys have both dealt with all of that. What are the things to you that distinguish the Applegate Valley?
So, obviously, coming from a decade in Willamette Valley, we're a lot sunnier. Like, this a day like today, this blue sky and sunshine, that is a rare thing. No Willamette Valley in Portland area in the winter. We love it when it happens, but not so rare here. And certainly, what I like about the Applegate, again, like the difference between the much wetter Willamette Valley, is that we get rain here, but like less than half of what the Willamette Valley gets. So we're kind of right on the edge of what is possible for potentially dry farming a vineyard, especially when the vineyard gets older and deeper roots. Just kind of we're right on that cusp, which really allows for kind of the best of both worlds. If you can, which is what we've been doing here, is if you can be training those vines to really go deep, find the available water, start cutting that back, and just have your irrigation system here in case of emergency, like in case of some, like really warm event. But in general, try to back that off. But then, at the same time, you get all the benefits of much lower disease pressure. This is the ideal place to be farming organically and biodynamically, because we do have such, low disease pressures that it's a minimally risky proposition. It's all farming is risky, but trying to do it in a way that we do here with such few chemical inputs and things like that into the vineyard. I think the Applegate is just the ideal climate to do it.
Yeah, it's funny because I was forklifting in the snow like 3 days ago or whatever. Not that it was that much snow, but that is the thing that surprised me here the most. Like, it will randomly give you very, I don't know if snowy days is the right way to phrase it, because there's only a few snow days per year, but you can go skiing and snowboarding not far from here. But then the summers are super hot, which reminds me of Napa and a few other regions I've worked in. But I love that this is just such a little hidden gem, and I feel like it brings in a lot of people kind of traveling, like you said, between Oregon and California. So a lot of really talented farmers and winemakers out here. I don't know if it parallels another region I've worked in, because all of them are so unique, but
Absolutely right.
Yeah. But I like that you truly get 4 seasons, I'll say. That's really fun here. Yeah.
So last January, we took 2 days and sat down and really reevaluated our viticultural program. We've gone through a lot of changes here. We were feeling our way forward, and some of the things we did didn't work. So we instituted a new range of farming practices. How did that go for us through the year, and what did you feel about that?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things we noticed is how our younger vines were responding to some of the vineyard treatments that we were doing. In particular, obviously we're big proponents of no-till farming, and we really wanted to try to get that fully established as quickly as possible, just for the soil health and the soil microbiome and things like that. But we were perhaps found that we maybe rushed that a little bit in some instances. We have different soil types across the property here, different age vines, and trying to get the right match of the appropriate level of permanent cover crop vigor that is competitive but not overly competitive with younger vines, and trying to really focus on what those vines need to get fully established. I think that's part of what we learned, and how to start targeting maybe more of our both biodynamic approaches to creating better ability of the plant to find the nutrients it needs, versus making sure that we are also providing the appropriate nutrition for younger vines as well. I think we made a pretty good. We understood a lot after last year, and we made a lot of really good changes. And we did see really positive benefits from that reflected in this year's harvest. So I do like the fact that, I mean, there's not a whole lot of projects like Troon, like what we're doing here. So we kind of end up writing our own instruction manual as we move forward. But yeah, we're continue learning, and I think we saw some positive outcomes this year.
Yeah, our yams looked pretty good overall as far as nitrogen, and plants just were very happy, I'll say. So, you know, we have a lot of very young vines, so obviously you want to kind of navigate the season in the vineyard based on data, but also on just visuals. And I mean, things were very happy. Like I remember walking around, maybe the first time was like in April, and you were like, it looks really good right now. And yeah, just you can feel the good vibes, the good energy when you're walking around. So we still learned quite a bit, but I think overall, like, things looked really good. And as Nate was mentioning, you know, we saw a lot of benefits to a lot of things we had planned in that biodynamic meeting and throughout the year. But then have even more things on our list to navigate in this coming year. So never stops.
So just as a general overview, how did the 2025 season progress for you?
Yeah, well, you know, I always kind of keep little notes throughout the year just to remind me. You know, I kind of have like a journal of what happens. But a few of the things that I made note of that I thought was interesting is, you know, if you're just looking at the growing season as a whole, kind of notable differences would be, you know, we had a very cool and wet April, which was particularly great because we continued getting snow. So the mountains around us stayed snowy. Like our local ski area, Mount Ashland, stayed open for almost an extra month because they had so much snow and good quality snow. So we always love those years, right? Because that snowpack is what's going to drive our water availability in the summer. And the better the snowpack, the lower the drought possibilities, things like that going into the season. So that was nice to see. The flip side of that is we were a little nervous about what that might mean in terms of our ability to get into the vineyard to do a first mowing pass for frost protection, because if it stays really wet, you know, you kind of have to stay out of the vineyard. And spring frosts are an occasional problem here. Again, that's part of the excitement of being right on the cusps of the vine's kind of growing window. But there was only 2 nights I wrote down that there was even a concern of that, but it ended up, you know, not being problematic for us at all. So that's you know, knock on wood. It's always great when that happens. One of the things that was new for us in the 2025 growing season is that we learned that we have a new early riser on our property, and it's Beurre Blanc. Like Beurre Blanc dethroned Grenache as the you know, earliest to rise in terms of coming out of the shell and starting the bud break process. So we have a new champion. At least we did in 2025. We'll see. It's again younger vines. They're often a little more precocious. So we'll see what happens in 2026.
Should have a bet this year.
Yeah, right.
Like everyone at Troon, yeah.
Yeah, we could do one of those. What's it called? Like when you everybody, you know, you put the squares out of that. Just
we'll do one.
we could do it. But yeah, but after bud break, just to kind of do a quick recap, it's you know, what was also kind of notable is July we had warm but not like crazy hot weather in 2025. Yeah. Like we often get triple digits, at least at some point in our summers here for at least a couple days, and we didn't get that in this summer. And what's a little strange maybe is counterintuitively that actually puts the vines ahead, because when we do get those really hot temperatures, you know, all the leaves, the vines stop photosynthesizing. They stop creating more sugar because they need to close up their leaf stomata. They're trying to avoid desiccation. They need to maintain their water, and so they actually close up shop basically and take a siesta and try to just wait out the higher temps. And that didn't happen this year, so they actually just continued just photosynthesizing away. And so it's actually a benefit, in some ways, to not have those really hot temperatures. Avoid some vine stress as well. But the last unusual thing for us, I guess, moving into the harvest season was the September starting with a bang, literally, I said, because we had these thunderstorms. And so we had a little bit of rain in early September, which is very unusual for us as well. We normally don't get almost a drop of rain until October sometime, and sometimes even into November. So that was just, that's a blessing and a curse, right? It's nice to give the vines a little extra water, even if it was unintentional, as they move into that, last stages of those ripening stages. But it does what I was saying earlier about the minimal disease pressure here. It did up the potential for mildew and some rot issues, which we did see a little bit more of this year than we have ever really seen in the past. So blessing and a curse there, but I don't know, those were just some of my recollections from the 2025 kind of growing season.
Yeah, I remember we kept telling the interns that it said it was going to rain, and we were like, oh, that's Willamette Valley. This is like a light drizzle, and we'd all come in and be pouring rain the next day. So we had, I wish I had written down like how many days, but we had a few, like not full weeks, but just kind of like sporadically, there'd be some pretty heavy rain. So yeah, that was a lot different. Last year was just like beautiful, sunny. We left all the ferments outside. Mm-hmm. So temperature was definitely something that we had to get crafty on a little bit more with our ferments this year.
So most wine regions have a particular variety that they're famous for. So here we have 20 varieties. What are the unique challenges going through the season of working with so many varieties?
Well, they should, in theory, all come in at very different times, but what we're learning, and with how many projects we have going on, and like to elaborate on that, it's like we have all these different red varieties, but some are being used for rosé, some are being used for red. Did you do the math on how long harvest was this year?
Yeah. So what's interesting is, first off, we had 51 separate picks, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So that's
if you're a winemaker, that's
51,
that's a lot.
51 picking decisions.
Yeah.
Is something interesting.
And we'll tell you, should I say tons now, I guess?
Sure, yeah.
158.75 tons.
Mm-hmm.
So you do the math on that, it's quite a lot.
Right, yeah, so if you average it out, it's like 3 tons per pick. So which isn't, how it happens. We have some things that are more, but we have a lot of these little unique things that all need to be considered separately and harvested. Again, back to our minimal intervention philosophy, it needs to be picked at a very precise time to have the balance that we ultimately will need in the winery. So
yeah. And last year was only 2 weeks about a picking, right? It's like 15 days in 2024.
Okay, yeah, 2024 was really compressed. This was compressed, but less, a little bit, because, the first pick at Troon wasn't until September 15th, but our first pick was actually August 28th.
Yeah.
We purchased a little bit of fruit from the Rogue Valley, from the Bear Creek Valley this year. They're warmer than us, and it shows in that picking day. So August 28th, and then our final pick was October 9th.
Okay.
But again, we didn't start picking at Troon until the 15th of September, so we just had those just a couple weeks of...
Felt longer, I guess.
Well, and I did take a note of this too. So it was the 27th of September when we finally got that little bit of rain. I don't know where I put that down. As well. So we had the thunderstorm early, and then we had great weather, and then we had a little bit of rain at the end of September, which we all were thankful of, because that actually finally slowed things down a bit, and we could take a little break and finally get caught up with all the fruit that had just been, the deluge of fruit that had been coming into the winery. I think because this happens again in the Willamette Valley frequently, and you actually appreciate those forced breaks of just the constant the next day is another pick and then, another bunch of fruit coming in. Like sometimes you just need those days to stop and just take stock of everything you've got and really get on top of what you have. So that was good to have.
So Nate, most people tend to, when they talk about picking decisions, they talk about bricks.
Yeah.
Sugar, you pick on pH.
We do.
So explain that thought process.
Yeah, so because we are looking for balanced wines, especially for whites and rosés, but also for reds and amber wines, what you need to have a balanced wine is proper acidity, proper pH, however you want to talk about it. It's a little confusing when you talk about pHs just because the lower the pH, the higher the acid. So when you hear people talking about it, like if you're like, oh yeah, I picked high acid, that means low pH, kind of counterintuitively. Anyway, since that is our target, it does lead to that balance year after year, but then it also leads to the vintage variation because at a similar acidity level, you're going to have very different like sugar levels, and total alcohols, and different types of flavor development in different years based on when the vine reached that point of acid. So what's kind of strange is in a slightly warmer year like 2025, somewhat counterintuitively, that means a lot of our wines are actually lower alcohol in 2025, a warmer year, because we as things heat up, the vines start losing some of their acids faster. And if we're concerned about that acid balance and we pick for that acid, that means it has accumulated less sugar by the time it gets to that important acid break. So in most other kind of more conventional approaches, really hot years, you have really high alcohol wines because they keep soaking up the heat, and people just leave them out there because they're going to dump pounds and pounds and pounds of tartaric acid from a bag to fix that whole acid problem. But if you don't do that, you end up with just differences in wines that might be unexpected, like sometimes warmer vintages having lower alcohols, but yet still balanced wines.
So then as biodynamic winemakers, the choices you make in the vineyard are kind of your final options. So how does that affect your thinking in picking the fact that you just can't make all these corrections?
I think, like he was saying, we pick mainly based on pH, but obviously we're not just looking at a number. It's like we're going to walk out there and taste it, or if our interns took a sample that day and they have the juice lined up ready for us to taste, sometimes you get a number back that is super believable, and maybe you run it again and it says a certain thing, but you're like, that actually just doesn't taste like exactly right for a pick right now. But I think most of the time it's like Nate kind of has his targets. Yeah, there's like a window basically that you have, so it's like there's a little bit of an option, but it's like I think pretty much everything this year came in kind of as planned, and we literally don't use anything else if possible, but there are, based on standards, like you can be using bentonite and a few other things within your winery, but if we...
Yeah, even in Demeter,
yeah.
Bentonite is...
a clay, yeah. So there are some options for people with various certifications, but if we can, we'd like to not add anything if possible. And also we would like to push back sulfur additions if possible. So our goal is to have the most stable situation, and I think I'll let you talk more about.
I want to mention too that that target kind of pH is not just one number; it's a whole bunch of different numbers, and it is very related to. I mean, basically each of those 51 picks kind of has their own target number, because it's highly relevant to what it is, like what we understand about the vineyard. We've been farming these blocks now, depending on the blocks for many years, in some cases for only a couple years in others. But each year we learn more about the block. If it's a certain one of our Syrah blocks that I know I really like to use a higher percentage of whole cluster fermentation on, for example, I will adjust my target pH on that, because I know that whole cluster fermentation, while I love all the things it does, one of the things, another consequence of whole cluster fermentation is a natural deacidification process that occurs there. Additional potassium and things like that are released into the wine matrix, and so you always see a decrease in acidity, so an increase of pH, depending on how much whole cluster you use. That can be somewhat significant. It can be like 0.2, 0.3 change in pH just from the act of using whole cluster. So that absolutely needs to be factored in before you pick those grapes, right? So there's not just one target. It's unfortunately not that simple, but that is the important way that we maintain, even making a very diverse range of wine styles. It is how we continue to seek out balance for each of those styles, is what I want to say.
And Nate was mentioning how there's a lot that goes into figuring out what those targets are. It depends a lot on if we're going to be making a white wine, rosé, but something that we're digging into now too is Nate's gone through every single block and variety and kind of made a brief outline of what he thinks about that grape on that block, what it's going to be for, characteristics of those vines. So that way, like Craig was mentioning, we're truly looking at vineyard through the winery and kind of, understanding all the way back to beginning of the year. It's how do we use all the resources that we have to get the best numbers possible to make what we want to make happen. So obviously things always change throughout the year, but we can have our plan that we go off of.
And a kind of corollary to what you just said is that in really trying to get to know those blocks, what we really need to do is we need to determine what the best use of that block is. What does it want to be? Because there's a lot of different ways you could do this. You could whole cluster or not whole cluster. You can make it as a rosé, you can make it as a red wine, you could do a carbonic, you could do a lot of different things with each one. But to find the thing that thing wants to become and then support it in its process of becoming that thing, that's how you're going to have the least obstacles, the greater success in a very low intervention system. That's the process that we have to slightly refine each year. Each vintage gives us, one new page in the history of what that grape is and wants to be at Troon. And so, really continuing to dial in the intention behind that is ultimately, what we how we're going to achieve the best wines we can from all of those different 51 picks.
We should talk just a bit about sulfur, because the whole no sulfur rage that I think is not a great idea. Fortunately, it seems to be trending the other way. Mm-hmm. But I think you have a very distinctive sulfur program here that's very intentional. Mm-hmm. And if you could go into that a bit.
Some may say reckless.
I'd say intuitive. I feel like Nate's the most intuitive person I've worked with sulfur, because it's really you say reckless, I'm guessing, because most people would be what are you doing? But it's really truly you're feeling out, tasting, looking at data, and then comparing that with looking and tasting depending on where it's at in fermentation. But it's truly case by case, which takes a lot of time. But yeah.
Yeah, I think not using sulfur at crush is the first place where we diverge from the majority of wineries. That's just so common. And I guess to spoiler alert, we do use sulfur. We use it before bottling.
Or non-spoilage.
Yes, yeah. Spoiler,
And that is why.
while we do intentionally make vinegar here now, we do not want our wines becoming a vinegar. Very separate production program. Luckily, not in the same place at all. But yes, that we do use sulfur here, but I mean, kind of ludicrously small amounts compared to most others. But yeah, just trying to determine if the health of those grapes can accommodate having zero sulfur added at crush. And I mean, that is why we farm this way. Biodynamics specifically is in regenerative organic techniques in general, but biodynamics I think is particularly strong in just creating this both diverse and healthy microbiome across not just, we always talk about it in the soils, but also on the vines, on the grapes. That's what's coming into the winery, and both learning to trust in the health of that diverse ecosystem to remain stable without you starting to tinker with it by somewhat selectively or really, I guess, somewhat non-selectively, just destroying huge chunks of those populations with sulfur as it comes in. Kind of learning to trust in that process, but learning when you can trust in that process, and maybe when you can't trust in that process is again part of that. Each year we learn a little bit more about different blocks and how they respond to different vintages, and the rain that we saw with a little extra rot, what does that mean? And especially for spontaneous ferments and things like that. So but then like Micah was saying, trying to, I think our main goal with a sulfur perspective is trying to kick the can down the road as long as possible before ever adding sulfur. Because in general, once you do choose to add sulfur, the wine kind of starts needing sulfur. So if you can push that back as long as you can through a bunch of other means, which we do not have time to discuss in this podcast, but there's a lot of other ways of certainly minimizing oxygen and or dealing with oxygen, particularly through the use of lees and different types of vessels that do a better or worse job of kind of keeping the wine either in contact with their lees or away from oxygen. Yeah, there's a lot of things we can and do employ to try to maintain this lower sulfur regime, basically.
So as you mentioned a little while ago, over 150 tons, that's a lot more than we picked.
Close to 160.
Okay. in the past, and with a very small crew. I remember everybody being a little toasty at the end of harvest. How did you deal with that surge of fruit that wasn't all expected?
Well, you just gotta make it, honestly. I've had a few other harvests that this reminded me of, and I mean, every winery is so different, and you always have different scenarios of the amount of staff you have, and here we do a lot of smaller projects. So, where at a larger winery, if you get, twice as much or more fruit from a year previous, that might look a lot different than someplace like Troon, where we have a 2-ton press and we have a pretty versatile space, but still it's like I had mentioned, we do, I don't know, I said in this podcast, but we do outdoor bin ferments that we can move around with a forklift really easily into the sun or shade. And when it rains a million times, you have to keep finding space to put them indoors. And we even had a fire at one point briefly. So it's to be able to multiply something that you were doing at a much smaller scale when you're doing so many barrels and bins and things. It's just really, it's like a sport, right? You realize that you're in the game, and you gotta get through it. So we have a wonderful team here, and we were able to get a lot of voluntolds, we were calling them, to come and help with things like punch downs and sorting fruits. because there was quite a bit of work. Maybe I will say the punch down stats now, but I was saying things multiply a little bit faster at a place like this when you're doing so many small projects. We were curious how many punch downs alone we were doing, and this is not exact, but it's just kind of...
Ooh, I took a guess too. Let's see how close I can.
Did you take a guess?
What was your guess?
Or like from the sheets, right?
Any kind of, yeah.
Okay. So from 2024, we did 68.3 tons total. And this is for reds, mainly for punch downs. We did 471 punch downs was what I got. This last year, 158.75 tons again. And so instead of doing 471 punch downs, we did around 1,446 punch downs.
It's almost the same number. I had about right around 1,400 punch downs. Yep.
Yeah, and we could point the punch down isn't one punch.
Yeah.
It's not, it's an extended punching period.
Like even if you say, this is how on that, even if you say that's 5 minutes per punch down, which punch downs generally take, that's 120 hours of straight punching down, like 24 hours, 120 hours. That's how days and days of just like pure somebody punching something down.
Yeah.
And then you put all those whole clusters in there.
Well, yeah. Whole clusters that I love so much.
Yeah.
Makes those punch downs a lot harder.
Yeah. And this was all of Troon partaking in this. It was not just Nate and I. But every morning someone starts with punch downs. So I mean,
literally all of Troon this year. We'll
literally.
We had the gardeners coming in doing punch downs. We had some tasting room people. We had sales. Anybody on property. If we saw them, we're like, hey, you don't look as busy as we are. Come on over here.
Yeah. So that and that's just one task, right? So you see how much things multiply pretty quickly. I think it's just when you're in a situation like that, Nate and I both have a lot of experience at a lot of different types of wineries. So I think it's really cool that you see something going wrong in theory, or you're like, oh my gosh, I need to figure out, how to do this at this scale. And we've never done that before. And we probably think this is normal, but it's like you're able to kind of make those snap decisions because you've seen another scenario at another winery, and maybe it takes a little extra work or something, extra volunteers, but I feel like we navigated pretty well. Things breaking, needing to bring people in at various hours to help. You're always going to have issues during harvest, but I think that is just kind of part of being a winemaker. It's like we probably had more this harvest than a lot of other vintages have worked, but that comes with the territory. And then you sleep after that for an extended period of time.
I have more fun facts.
Tell us the fun facts.
So we had 74 different fermenters only for reds and oranges, right? So 74 fermenters.
Did you do a comparison at all?
No, I didn't. I'm
okay.
Solely focused on 2025. I'm there in future focus. That's what I do.
Not going back.
114 barrel ferments, which actually seemed a little low to me. But we had DISA. We had some larger vessels where some of our white, particularly our white ferments, were taking place in like the concrete and stuff, which we should get to in a second. But so let's see, and then we had 12 other vessels. Let's see. So, but the point is that with all those vessels, I also estimated that we took about 4,000 readings, like Brix and temperature readings.
That's a good one.
And that's continuing, by the way, because we still have some barrels of white. And it's like, so that number's going to get bigger. We're going to do this again today, in fact. So it'll be 4,030 by the end of the day. So just kind of, again, like the minutia is, I think what I'm trying to say here is just the minutia is so important in this. And like, especially with how we make wine, with all of our spontaneous ferments. Each one of these fermentations is its own universe, and like, so you do have to track them all separately. Like, they're not the same.
Yeah.
They're not homogenized in any way, which is why the wine's not homogenous, but it's a lot of effort to track them all individually because they are unique. Each one of those barrels are unique, even though several of them are the same. Were the same when you filled them. They rapidly become different. I mean, not in bad ways, just in unique and interesting ways, and you need to account for that in your winemaking practices.
Yeah.
So now that you've had a chance to taste a lot of these wines as they're fermenting and aging, what are some descriptions and what is the personality to you of the 2025 harvest?
Well, first I'll say a lot of things going through Mallow right now. So when we are taking readings or samples for whatever reason now, both of us, whenever we can, we do taste things, and it is a little hard to taste through that like green apple yogurt because if you're not familiar with malolactic fermentation, it's like there's still a process happening in the wine that is changing both the chemistry and its taste. And so overall, I mean, lower alcohol, and I feel like the concentration in a lot of blocks, though, like I was kind of looking over my press notes from last year to this year. I didn't get to take quite as many because it was a little hectic, but just from what few notes I did take in comparison and remembering, it's like concentration is still improving, though, because we have older vines now, and there were various blocks, Mavedra. I don't know why I was paying close attention to that one, but there are certain things that it's like, I just personally, having tasted it many points last year, and then, you know, we continue tasting in the cellar to know if and when we might add sulfur to navigate if malolactic fermentation is done, to do our blending trials. It's like, I'm starting to kind of understand block to block a little bit more. And so I think there are a lot of, I don't know if improvements is the right word. I feel like that sounds wrong, but it's just, yeah, things are getting better in a lot of ways. But there's a lot of like fresh, delicate flavors we're getting on things. It's kind of hard to tell full descriptors yet, though, because it's difficult to taste through a lot of things. I will say, I think we're going to go into some of our different vessels and projects that we liked. One thing I just tasted yesterday, because I had to pull a sample, was the 25 Syrah in Thorn, which is our concrete Syrah. And this is really cool because we have a 2024 Syrah right next to the 2025 Syrah in these concrete vessels. And so tasting just, you know, 2 different years has been really interesting, because since we make wine the way that we do, the 2024 does have a little bit of SO2 in it, but what happens a lot with Syrah and in these vessels, it's like you get this kind of up and down reduction situation. So depending on the day and the calendar, it can taste different at different times. And then we were kind of tasting and analyzing that in comparison throughout fermentation, and then, you know, on to actual wine being in this 2025 concrete tank. And yesterday, 2 days ago maybe, was the first time I tasted it, and I wasn't getting any mallow from it, and it was really complex. You know, texture is amazing. There's a lot of like red and purple fruit. You're getting a lot of the floral. Very, very cool right now. So that was, I think, one of the first wines I've tried that's like truly, I think, through, actually, we should look, through everything. And I don't know if there's anything that like stood out.
I'm going to briefly mention that you mentioned that it was in Thorn, which may be a character a lot of people are familiar with from a book and a movie. But just talk about our tank.
I'll let Nate talk about
That's the name of the tank.
His, yeah.
Yeah. So all of our large concrete vessels are named after dwarves because, under the mountain and all that. But it's, so what Mike is talking about is we were able to over vintage our 2024 Syrah inside the concrete vessel that it was fermented and had been aging in. Oftentimes we will either bottle those wines before the next vintage so that we can use those vessels again, or we might wrap them off to neutral oak or something again to open up that vessel. But we have enough concrete vessels right now that we made the decision to keep that in there because we really wanted to have this 100% fermented and aged Syrah in concrete. So that's the 2024 version. But then right next door we were able to do the same thing in the next tank over with the 2025 Syrah, same block. So yeah, it's a really cool comparison. It's clone 470. It's my pretty much one of my favorite clones of Syrah. Just very northern Rhone characteristics, like Mike was saying, with the purple fruit as well as some red and some dark fruit, and it's got a little bit of pepper in there, and just everything you love about Syrah. So, but very cool to start seeing what does that do after a year in concrete. Not a lot of people get to play around with that, so that was really cool to see. One of the fun things from this vintage. Another one in a similar way, the fermenter beyond that, Turin, was able to. We have Grenache that we fermented, 100% fermented, and are now aging. In 2024, we also fermented the Grenache in that concrete vessel, but when we pressed it off, we didn't have enough left to fill up that vessel. So we ended up last year fermenting in concrete and then putting some of that back into amphora to age. This year we fermented in concrete, left it there, but we also fermented more Grenache, in the amphora. And so we've got, and then we also have some Grenache that we fermented just in open top fermenter, but is now in like a huge demi-mude, basically larger than a puncheon barrel in the cellar. So we have 3 really cool versions of Grenache this year and for 2025, which was another highlight for me for what we did.
The Vermentino.
The Vermentino. I know, this is, in terms of again, a standout grape, Vermentino is always one of my favorites, certainly my favorite white grape, possibly my favorite grape at Troon, in terms of just what a great connection it has to our growing conditions. It just loves to be here. It just thrives. And we were able to have, again, they're kind of large vessels, so you need enough of it, but 793 gallons of concrete fermented and now aging Vermentino in concrete. So last year we were able to use one of our larger Dolia upside down eggs, concrete eggs. So our Vermentino from last year had about 50% concrete in it, but this year we hope to be able to release a 100% concrete fermented and aged Vermentino. So that's gonna be really cool.
Yeah, and you've done an extended lees Vermentino before, and then have used it in Druid's White and it's standalone. But it'll be really interesting. I was excited because we had that Vermentino tasting in 2024, and it was a lineup maybe of 15 wines or something like that. And we were looking up a ton of facts about them and then continued drinking a lot of Vermentino because we love it. And the whole idea of concrete and some of the ones that stood out the most to us, we were very excited to have enough to actually fill up one of these. And since I started, I think those 2 slowly I've just seen the progression. All of these tanks are in a row that we're mentioning. And it's I started 2 years ago and there was only 1 filled. And so slowly they've all now filled up. So we'll see. We have quite a range of experiments going on in there, but it'll be cool. I think another really interesting one is the Veuve Blanc.
Yep.
You should talk about how we got more toys this year too, not just more grapes, because those amphora are new to us.
That's right. Yeah, we got 2 kind of on the larger side sandstone amphora. So those were unique, and the reason Micah is bringing this up now is like, so with Beurre Blanc, this was our first. We did have a little bit of Beurre Blanc in 2024. It was the first harvest of it for us, enough for us to start learning what its characteristics might be here. But this was 2025 was our first actual harvest of any appreciable amount. We actually could fill a press load of Beurre Blanc this year, but because again we're still trying to like figure, like I mentioned earlier, like we want to figure out what this thing wants to be, right? Like what direction does Beurre Blanc want to go at our property, and like how do we need to support it to get there? So we tried a bunch of different methods this year with Beurre Blanc, and that's what makes this one so fun. Is we actually did some Beurre Blanc we fermented in stainless steel, which is very unusual for us. The only thing we normally ferment in a stainless steel tank is our sparkling wines and our carbonic, our glue. But we made the decision to ferment some of it in stainless steel, and then we put some of it into a sandstone amphora and some of it into a concrete egg. So the exact same juice, right? It went and was split in those three very different directions. And so and then subsequently, we did barrel down the stainless steel fermented Beurre Blanc into neutral oak. So we now have these neutral oak barrels of Beurre Blanc, the sandstone amphora, and the concrete egg. And tasting the similarities and the differences between those is really crazy. Like, it's so cool to see, like, just how that, somewhat singular but simple winemaking decision of what vessel to put in just utterly changes the trajectory of that wine. What does Beurre Blanc want to be? Is it like which of these approaches? Is it one of these? Is it two of these and blend back together? It's these are all the little experiments we run each year to just try to learn and understand these grapes better.
I'll be interested to keep trying that too, because going back to Nate talking about everything being its own world, that all started together, right? Because I think we were like waiting for vessels to open up at one point. Things were overlapping a bit too much for us. And so then eventually, I racked this same wine, in theory, to 3 different places. And then from there, I think it was like 2 weeks later, we did a tasting, and you and Garrett were there.
Yeah.
I think it was with Michael.
Yeah.
And we tasted all of them, and they all tasted so different, just flavor-wise, but also textures. And then like you and I knew which ones were going through mallow the most or whatever. And so for like number-wise and fermentation-wise, it can completely go different directions, and so something could end up taking way longer, even though it started off as like the same batch of wine in theory. And then the textural element, I'm so interested, especially on the amphora and the egg. We love using that egg. I wish we had more of them.
I put a little note that, wink, wink, right, general manager?
Anybody out there has got a free egg.
I put a little note down to remind myself, and then I forgot. But when we brought up Beurre Blanc, this has got to be one of the geekier varieties. So I wanted to mention that it is a white grape from the Southern Rhone, like historically, derived from the Southern Rhone grapes, one of the 16, 17 white grapes that are permitted depending on where you are in the Southern Rhone. And the other Troon Nate Winters was asking me, he's like, how would you describe this grape to people in terms of like how it comes across as wine? And this is an imperfect thing, but like to me it comes across as like the Rhone version of like a Chardonnay Viognier, because like both texturally and like some of the aromatics, it's not to the level of Viognier, but it's there. Like sometimes Viognier can get this, we try to avoid some of this, but like a slight oiliness is just inherent in some of those Viognier wines, especially if it gets a little overripe. That oily kind of character gets a little higher in terms of the texture, but like Beurre Blanc has a tiny bit of that, but then it also has more of that kind of, typical like barrel fermented Chardonnay, like kind of that leesy character that the texture across the mid palate you can get on that. Like Beurre Blanc kind of combines a lot of those things together. At least that's what we're finding at Troon. So for those of you who have never heard the word Beurre Blanc before, now you know.
So we're coming full circle here. We're next Monday and Tuesday is our annual farming retreat. Again, what are the lessons of 2025 you want to take into this year's retreat?
I think, like we were mentioning earlier, you're always going to see some positives, but like realize later that you could still add things to your program. Nate and I are pretty busy a lot, but I think we're going to push ourselves to be out even more in the vineyard, and we're having fun so far, like meeting with Jason, kind of coming up with more of an outline for the year. Just paying more attention now that these vines are a little bit older. It's like, Nate's mentioning, like, what does this fruit want to be? It's like maybe some of the things we've planned for in the past will change slightly. And I think we'll see even more potential, obviously, once we start tasting more post-malolactic fermentation. But it'll be cool to just kind of elaborate on what we've done in the past, and then I think syncing that too with Garrett will be cool in the coming days. I don't know if there's like specific things you want to talk about, but
for me, I would say that like vine balance is like what I'm thinking of for 2026, and that's basically like we are, in many instances, the only people in Southern Oregon, sometimes in Oregon, sometimes even in the Pacific Northwest, growing some of the things we're growing. And so we don't have another model to look at what some of these grapes should or shouldn't be doing, like in the vineyard, like what they need to be balanced. And so like we have a couple of growing seasons now for some of these grapes in the vineyard, and then we see how that translates in the winery. And so trying to put those puzzle pieces together and figure out, okay, what is the vine balance we need for each of these varieties in the vineyard to like enter the winery with that same balance that we need for the wine we want to produce from those grapes. And so it's that continual learning process, but each vintage we learn a little more. And especially this last year, we kind of had some of the first or maybe second harvests on a lot of these more unique varieties that there is just less of a knowledge base on because no one grows them. And so, yeah, for me, I guess moving into 2026 is trying to fine tune some of these totally unique varieties. Some of the other varieties, certainly varieties that had been planted at Troon from 1972, like some like our Syrahs and things, and even Vermentino we've had here for a long time. We just have so much more historical knowledge of what those grapes need here. But some of these newer ones, yeah, we're still learning. So to me, it's finding better balance for some of these new things based on what we've seen so far.
So as we come to a close here of our hour, any just final thoughts for you as individual winemakers in the 2025 vintage?
I'll give you time to think. I mean, because all I'll say is, we have a lot more fruit this year, which is great, which means we have a lot more experiments this year, which means we have a lot more kind of fun little projects in the cellar. So I guess in terms of what I'm looking forward to in 2026 is starting to bottle some of these things that we will be bottling for the first time, at Troon, and maybe creating some special offerings like for the wine club and things of things that we've had before, but like never in this way, or it's been a component of a blend, but we now have enough of it that we could also offer it as like a special little treat for people. So yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to being able to do this year.
Yeah, last year our blending sessions turned into like how many new SKUs can we add because everything tasted so good. So I do think in the case of a vintage like this, it's like all this extra work, right, on the front end, but then like Nate's saying, I mean, I'm also really excited for blending because it's like you get to actually try all these things that you kind of tried to figure out like, okay, how do we make this the best way possible, even though we're getting more fruit in and maybe I don't have that certain tank available, or I need to like change my original plan. To see how all of that fits together will be very fun. I think even just using some of the vessels that we had in the past, seeing fruit come in that hadn't before, stuff like that was really exciting this year, despite how tired we were in the moment. But just like every vintage, I mean, lots to build on, lots was learned, and a shout out to our interns too, who really did an amazing job on top of Troon. I think one positive thing, you've mentioned this too, is that our whole team does so much. I mean, I think everyone wears 100 or 200 hats here, but to see everybody be able to come out and do punch down, sort, be at dinners, just like, you know, actually see what's going on. We had a lot of people like making us coffee and stuff, so it was really nice, just like truly all of Troon being involved in one way or another. So I think that despite the hard jobs that we had to kind of figure out and navigate, it did, on the bright side, really bring everybody together. I think everyone learned something about winemaking this year. So,
well, great. Thank you both. It's great to see everybody rested now and back to normal and get ready to go again.
Yeah, harvest is coming.
It is.
Always.